Welcome to Natural Collisions, brought to you by COAC Detroit. Conversations about the challenges and opportunities in the nonprofit sector, highlighting the voices in nonprofit work in Detroit and Southeast Michigan. I'm your host and program coordinator at COAC Detroit, Sharnae Sanders. Today's Natural Collision is between two organizations very active in the nonprofit community in Detroit and Southeast Michigan. One funds entrepreneurship and economic development, and the other advances the arts. We are glad to have
Jim Boyle, Vice President of Programs and Communications for the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. We are kind of a unique animal in that we are a 20-year spend down with 14 years left, a corpus of $1.2 billion that has to be spent in 16 counties in 2 states, in Western New York and Southeast Michigan. So we're working through that grant making to continue to improve the quality of life in those areas.
And he is in conversation with
Omari Rush, Executive Director of CultureSource. CultureSource is a coalition of cultural organizations and creative people based in Detroit, serving Southeast Michigan, helping folks have positive community connections and advance creative and cultural expression.
Both organizations are very familiar with COAC Detroit, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation as a major funder, and CultureSource as a partner and fellow co-activist, a term we use to describe some of our frequent guests or visitors that are part of the COAC community. When we got Jim Boyle and Omari Rush in the digital room to talk, the conversation started with the very non-digital elephant in everyone's room, COVID-19.
Regarding our plans for the beginning of the year, they were bright and optimistic. I've been in the role of executive director of CultureSource for 3 years now, and January was essentially beginning the 3rd year, and I was feeling like, I finally gotten my legs under myself. We've gotten organized. We have a calendar. And we were feeling good about being able to achieve some things that we laid out. We had some exciting programs lined up. And then March hit and it all completely just went out the window. We actually had our biannual member meeting. We have these twice a year where we convene our entire membership of CultureSource for a kind of a half-day session of learning together and connecting in person. And that was supposed to be March 12th, and that did not happen.
Like Omari, so many great plans. And, I think we're a relatively new foundation and we're a spend down foundation. So we kind of gotten past a lot of the data gathering and sitting at the right tables and learning. And we're starting to orient ourselves around kind of some more actionable stuff and kind of really hitting our stride in some of our focus areas. But because of the way that we operate, we're nothing if not adaptable. And March, whatever day that was, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, I think everything was kind of thrown up into the air. So I think we had to really kind of reorient our world around a new COVID reality. That's for sure.
We had 2 new members on our team at CultureSource at that time, and we were trying to both welcome new colleagues to a team and kind of both adapt to their personalities and help them kind of adopt some of our practices. And all that just became significantly more complicated as we ended up having to close our office and work remotely and just do a bunch of things very differently. And it really challenged me as a leader too, because my own personal brand of leadership had been to be with people and bring people together and sit down in close proximity to someone and talk it out. And all those tools were gone.
It's funny you say that because it felt like it was coming at you from every angle. You had your own organizational needs and trying to figure out your team and how you're going to operate, where people were going to operate, the technology behind it. You had a lot of crisis in the nonprofit world for our own grantees. So sitting with them, like you said, Omari, every day, every hour, new information, new changes across the landscape. So trying to help grantees navigate that while you're dealing with, everyone's dealing with their own internal crises. There's the community at large, right? I mean, there's areas that we don't fund in, frankly, that we supported greatly, around the food related and health related. There's managing of the board and the trustees. So we were meeting every single week with our board, and I really commend them for being able to just kind of move money and get updates from them so we could be nimble and react. And I think everybody was trying to figure out technology. You're at home. Is Zoom the platform? Is Teams? How does it work? Has everybody got enough internet speed? We work in 16 counties in 2 states. So we do a lot of grant making in Western New York as well as here. So just disconnected from that whole community. But misery loves company. And I think everybody was trying to figure it out at the same time. It certainly was an interesting time.
We similarly work across a kind of a region, though we're just in one state. Kind of catch my breath at that. Thank goodness. 2 states. But I do have a kind of it's my like fun COVID story, and it makes me think about working across the distance and the different kinds of nonprofits and kind of social benefit organizations that we support. And that was, I remember we had canceled our biannual member meeting. I said it's going to be on Thursday, March 12. On Wednesday, March 11, we canceled it, just understanding that it just, we had guest speakers flying in and they weren't getting on planes. I remembered canceling it and just kind of sitting back in my chair saying, it's going to be really curious to see how all of this plays out. It seems so wild. Well, then later that late afternoon, I got a phone call, a voicemail from Ann Parsons, the CEO of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And this is the first time I'm publicly telling this story. I've told Ann this story. But I get a call from Ann Parsons, and, she says on the voicemail, "Hey, Omari, it's Ann. And Ann and the DSO have been founding members of CultureSource. Hey, Omari, it's Ann. I'm just calling to get some insights from you to find out what you know. We're very confused here. We keep getting all these conflicting messages about to close or to not close. And, I'm just wanting to know what CultureSource's position is on this and how you all are planning on reacting." Well, when I finished with that voicemail, I said, "Wait, Omari, what is our position? Wait, what are we going to do?" And I was like immediately snapped into like full gear, full action. And I went home and then went to one of my favorite working spots, a bar, and posted up with my laptop and worked until closing and came up with our COVID plan. Came into the office the next morning. I think they might say guns blazing or something was blazing. We pretty quickly mobilized. I called Ann back that morning and she said, "Mari, you're on the phone with our leadership team. What do you got?" And I kind of laid out the plan. And she said, "Oh, Omari, of course you had a plan. Of course you had this figured out," which of course was hilarious because the only reason why I had to figure it out is because she called. And then she says, "Well, of course, Omari, you're probably going to be convening the CEOs of the cultural organizations." And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Totally. And then she says, and you're probably doing that today, right? And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, totally. Today. Absolutely." And so within 2 hours, we ended up having a call of, I think, 50 CEOs of arts and culture organizations throughout Southeast Michigan. And we ended up having a weekly call of them for the spring and summer. And it was a really important lifeline for all of us. And, that really kind of framed CultureSource's response, that energy that Ann kicked off of feeling urgency, feeling the opportunity for service, feeling a real fire. And it's been just nonstop since. And it's been wild. Thanks for giving me a little bit of time to tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, like Omari, I think it's funny. You kind of find yourself back on your heels immediately.
Jim and Omari continue to discuss the pivots each organization had to make due to COVID-19.
I was in Buffalo on March 11th, and I think that was the day that kind of the NBA started to shut stuff down. And we had a meeting with the mayor about this, about the park design for a major park that we're building in downtown Buffalo, Ralph C. Wilson Centennial Park. And he was supposed to be there at a certain time. I forget what time. And we started getting calls from him that he wasn't going to make it. And then he pops up, somebody comes over and shows me on my phone that he's at a press conference about COVID. And I think some cases that had hit Buffalo. The NBA story was kind of breaking, and I was set to get on a flight, my last flight that I've taken. I haven't taken a flight since March 11th that evening. The mayor did end up coming to that meeting, but it was definitely a new world pretty much starting at that moment. Our pivots really have been around kind of planning with all of our partners, just like Omari. I mean, we've been on a lot of collaborative funding efforts, whether it be at the Community Foundation or the United Way Emergency Fund here in Southeast Michigan, similar funds in Buffalo, New York, and Rochester, New York, in their southern tier, and just really we really kind of shelved everything that we were working on, canceled all of our meetings, and started participating in kind of this immediate essential community needs response work. And our team each kind of was assigned certain areas so we could kind of make sure we were on the right calls and figuring out how to build a cohesive response, not only within the foundation, but really with partner funders, with private entities, with nonprofits, and trying to build those coalitions. I think we're really fortunate here in Southeast Michigan where a lot of that collaborative stickiness is already kind of here. So people know each other, and whether it be the funding community or nonprofit intermediaries like COACT and Michigan Nonprofit Association and MCR, a lot of those people have really strong relationships. And, I think we were able to listen and infill where we were needed.
Jim, where you left off is actually a great segue to another kind of anecdote. Back in June of 2019, CultureSource hosted the National Endowment for the Arts in Southeast Michigan for their National Council on the Arts meeting. Is only the second time in at least 30 years that this meeting has happened outside of DC, with a new chairman of the agency. And as the chair, Marianne Carter, was going around to all these communities in Southeast Michigan, she was just blown away at everywhere she went. She would mention one organization, and the people that she was talking with would say, "Oh yeah, we're doing a partnership with them. Oh yeah, we're working with them." Within hours of her being on the ground, she understood that in Detroit and Southeast Michigan, the kind of bonds of collegiality, the networks, the sense of collaboration is just so strong. And I've heard her speak publicly a variety of times after that visit, and she's continued to remark about that characteristic of our region. And so, Jim, absolutely, it's a real kind of signature of what's happening here, and I think it's a thing that has helped us, at least in my perspective, navigate a pretty crummy situation, that's challenged us in so many ways. I'm just affirming your sense of collegiality and collaboration.
Yeah, the worst kept secret about philanthropy is we don't do anything, right? We support others to do stuff. So we need it. We have to stay connected to people and organizations that actually do the work on the ground. And as Omari said, there's already so much great work that's happening and so much great collaboration here. So I think what we try to do is continue to incentivize some of that with our funding and fill gaps where we can be helpful. We have a huge nonprofit support piece of our work. And the premise there has always been about collaboration, even pre-COVID. How do we strengthen the nonprofit support entities, the intermediaries that are doing the work? How do we give them the time and space to both physically and mentally bring their kind of collective brain power together in service to nonprofits? And we've seen a lot of that happen in the COVID crisis. Having worked at the New Economy Initiative, I've seen this work in the entrepreneurial space. Nonprofits obviously aren't small businesses and they have unique needs, but the premise is kind of the same. How do you get them connected to resources in a way that's quick and easy so they get what they need when they need it? How do you build a culture of risk-taking and innovation as through these kind of collisions for all of us, nonprofits, philanthropy, the private sector? And then how do you support problem-solving platforms that really a bunch of organizations can get together and attack an issue? COVID is a massive issue, and you've seen some of that happening in this space as a response. So, if there's any shining light that comes out of this, it's, I think, reinforce that work that was already here. And I think those partnerships, that collaboration will outlast the crisis for sure. And I think it's been validated.
Mm-hmm. We at CultureSource, we have 7 guiding principles, and they're in no particular order. But the first one listed happens to be we're at our best when we work with partners and as collaborators and instigators, because fundamentally we just believe in that collaboration is the way to go. Partnership is the way to go. In COVID times, we are really fortunate to have, it's a mutual partner, Jim, the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, who was there and willing to think creatively with us about how we might support the cultural sector. And so we ended up launching with them the COVID-19 Arts and Creative Community Assistance Fund, also the Mouthful Fund. We could have come up with a shorter name, but we needed an opportunity for people across the region to be able to support organizations that they had been investing in for decades, even generations. And we also needed to, really extend a quick lifeline to organizations that were just in desperate need. And so Miriam Nolan was a great kind of champion of the fund. We went out and were able to get total of 9 fund contributors, almost got to $1 million for the region, and have been getting those resources out with the support of a fund committee to support both relief and resiliency in the cultural sector. And Jim, as you were just kind of touching on this kind of idea of innovation and the ways in which people learn and stretch and grow from this, crisis experience, this trying experience. We want to be able to help them take some risks. We want to be able to help them document some learning and hope that, these resources that we're able to offer through these funds allow them to do that. And so, something like that came together because of people's ability to be mobilized and to kind of act toward, some collective impact. So the sense of collaboration has been strong. I'm really proud of it. And even more so, the ways in which I'm seeing these peers connect and collaborate is absolutely, Jim, something that I feel is enduring. I feel like people have gotten some new muscles, some new realizations around how they could come together and how they can come together. And COVID has forced some pretty quick infrastructure that feels like it's going to last.
In 2019, COAC Detroit introduced the Activate Fund, a $1.5 million grant fund to support capacity building and collaboration of nonprofits in Southeast Michigan. The Activate Fund is a grant-making strategy to support nonprofit impact in our community that invests in 2 core areas: building nonprofit capacity to meet mission and building network capacity for social change. COAC worked with various intermediary partners and cross-sector community leaders from around the region to serve as strategic partners, advisors, and external jurors to the fund. While COAC takes the role in administering the fund, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation supports as the inaugural funder for the Activate Fund. One of the programs within the fund is the Collaboration Pilot, a program to support and encourage nonprofits to explore formal, long-term collaborations to maximize impact. CultureSource was selected as one of the awardees for the Collaboration Pilot program. Jim and Omari both discuss.
There's so many great layers to the fund. I mean, first, it takes the capacity building grant making out of our hands as a foundation and puts it into the hands of the support intermediaries. The people that actually do the work, the experts on the ground, those are the folks that made the grants. They framed it, and then they kind of distributed the money, and they looked at the applications. We just put some pretty loose parameters around what we wanted the dollars to do, and they built it. And by those entities, again, these are the nonprofit intermediaries, nonprofits that are really exclusively set up to support other nonprofits. By them working together and by strengthening those, it strengthens their relationships amongst each other. By strengthening those relationships, there's this network approach that's built that at the end of the day serves nonprofits, right? I also love the process, because built into the process was to identify other support entities. I think there was 220 different nonprofit support providers that were engaged in the process. So I think you see cross-sector providers, that I think are right there and revealed to nonprofits through the process itself. Beyond the real capacity that nonprofits got from getting the grants, I love the collaborative pilots, right, that I think Omari was part of, because it incentivized 2, 3, 4, 5 nonprofits to work together towards an issue. So we're agnostic about who gets the support. While we kind of seeded the fund, we don't support in the arts, but we didn't say this has to be in our giving areas. We're more interested in the system. And we feel, if there's a strong system, we've got faith that our nonprofits that we support in our areas that our trustees have lined out will ultimately get support if there's a stronger kind of system. So for us, it was an exercise in a network that we imagine, and that network behaving like a network, right? All led by the people who know the space best.
Well, I would first, of course, appreciate Jim and his colleagues' involvement in and investment in the program. We had already been developing a year-long partnership with COACT. We had been we have a series of monthly workshops that are inspirational and tactical. Half of the year is about fundraising, the other half of the year is about marketing, because those are pretty core issues to our members at CultureSource. And COACT just presented itself as just an ideal space and an ideal partner in that. I'll say that the one that we kicked off in 2020 in February about fundraising was at capacity, probably a little over capacity, but they were great sessions. And I will just say that I'm sad that we're not doing those right now at COACT, because, Alondra and her team there were just, really tremendous partners. But I will say what they've been able to put together with this collaborative through the Activate Fund has been really important. It kind of catalyzed, like we've been talking about it, a set of relationships that I think are going to kind of well position our sector for the long term. And it's just been so important. I'll speak kind of directly and just say that the cultural sector did feel a little left out, and has felt a little left out of some of the recovery efforts, as we were seeing a lot of energy and resources go, especially in those early days, to kind of very well-resourced entities that had strong relationships with banks or lenders. There was a lot of energy that was going toward kind of Main Street businesses that were going to bars and restaurants, that were going to things that people would call small businesses. And we realized as a cultural sector that people just did not see us in that light. We weren't seen as businesses that were having cash transactions at our doors, that were welcoming in customers off the streets, that were providing kind of critical services to communities. And that's something that we have to work on as a sector ongoing. Part of that has to do with the ways in which we kind of silo ourselves and think about museums and musicians and other attractions and all these things, and don't always speak cohesively. They're really interesting about this collaborative fund is it gave us that opportunity to really think about how we saw ourselves as more cohesive and unified. And so with ours, you have 4 organizations that are very different. You have a small independent music venue in Ann Arbor. And by small, I mean just by seats, though they certainly have a large reputation, the Arc, and do things outside of their Main Street Ann Arbor facility. But you have the Arc, you have the Michigan Science Center in the Cultural District in Detroit, and you have the Detroit Zoo, in Oakland County. But that certainly has a regional draw for its audiences. And then you have CultureSource. And we're all coming together through this Activate Fund to figure out how we can use our diverse insights, our diverse business models, our different ways of connecting with audiences and creative and cultural expression to advance our field. And the Activate Fund has set the table for us. And we're coming together and thinking about ways that we can collaboratively message across our whole sector to audience members so that their experience, whether they're going to be in a music venue indoors, whether they're going to be outside in a park or a zoo, whether they're going to be in a hands-on space, touching things or interacting with things and people, how their experience all feels health-focused, enjoyable, creative. And so this fund is allowing us to do that. It's also going to allow us to explore something like a purchasing consortium. We have not yet, as a sector, been able to leverage the collective buying power purchasing power of these diverse organizations, which have budgets that go from, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to the millions of dollars. And if we can do that, we can start to, again, I'm hearing this as a theme, use the tension of this crisis to make really positive long-term investments for and advancements for our sector. So, we are really appreciative of the Activate Fund and are in the process of coming together and figuring some things out.
Yeah, I get it. Having worked at the DIA in a past life and been involved in the arts in Detroit for a long time, I think it's an issue, and it's such an important part of what makes a place, right? From talent attraction and retention to social and emotional learning for kids that's so important as they develop. And I think it's a tough one. I mean, there was so much strain and stress at the beginning of this that I think everyone was kind of rallying around those immediate needs of that people's health, food, etc. But we've got to lift up and make sure that we've strengthened some of these areas as a community so we can kind of move forward. And we're by no means out of the woods. We've seen data that says attrition rates for nonprofits could be as high as 25 to 40% in Western New York and Southeast Michigan, the areas that we work in. So, who's going to do all this work as nonprofits are asked to do more with less? So it's an issue for the arts. It's an issue across the board for nonprofits, and it's something we need to figure out as a community.
Well, I would say some of my absolute best and closest friends are restaurant owners. And so, as I think about response efforts that have been government driven to philanthropy driven to just individual community driven, I appreciate anyone that is doing anything to support someone outside of their own immediate circle or their own kind of immediate cause area. So this isn't an either or for me or CultureSource. But I will say, kind of picking up on something that I heard from you, Jim, we are also thinking about how we can not just collaborate with the arts, but what's the ecosystem of entities, organizations that will create resiliency for the people in our sector. So, for instance, we know that restaurants, employ a lot of artists. They employ a lot of people who are gig workers, and so, how can we be allies to folks in the restaurant industry who are just taking a beating right now, knowing the ways in which they lift up an economy and add diverse kind of employment workforce opportunities to an economy. That's not necessarily an area that we had looked at before, but it's certainly one that we're looking at now.
And there needs to be collaborative effort between the nonprofit sector in our region to make it through this challenging time. COAC Detroit continues to foster collaboration through its programming and sharing resources while working closely with intermediary partners such as Michigan Nonprofit Association, Michigan Community Resources, Nonprofit Enterprise at Work, and Techtown Detroit, to name a few. The conversation continues.
Well, and Jim, the part of your comments that I loved was the ways in which you all had these solid community relationships and partnerships that you could just immediately go to, get resources to, and have pretty impressive amounts of trust in them getting them out to the community in ways that that you felt was going to kind of make some progress in a crisis, and having partnerships that are built on that kind of trust and that allow for that kind of responsiveness in crisis is exactly what, I'm hoping we all get even better at, that people that haven't been doing it take lessons and notes about, and get prepared to do that, folks, when the next thing hits, because, we're in just such a volatile world. And so.
Yeah, I totally agree. And never get comfortable, right? I mean, I think you've got relationships with folks, but that doesn't mean that you're reaching everybody. And I think it's incumbent upon us, particularly us as a foundation, as funders, is that we need to make sure we do our work in equitable ways and get into expand our reach, get into more grassroots communities and organizations that are run by leaders of color and serve communities of color. I think you can get comfortable with the relationships you do have and think that's the world, but it's not. So, we continue to try to challenge ourselves in those ways as well.
Jim, this was great. It was it was great to connect. Of course, how has this not happened before? But just COVID is bringing people together in new ways, and I'm just really pleased to bounce ideas off of you and bounce anecdotes off of you.
No, it's great to hear what you're up to. It reminds me that even in the COVID climate, I'm due for some museum visits, and I really appreciate all the work that you do. It's so integral to our community. So thanks for all your work, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Omari Rush of CultureSource. Find more information at CultureSource.org. And thank you to Jim Boyle of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Be sure to follow the work they are doing at Ralph Wilson Jr. Foundation.org. On Natural Collisions, COAC Detroit loves to highlight nonprofits doing exciting work in the Detroit and Southeast Michigan area. This episode, we love to highlight the work of the Union. And Nicole Wilson has served as the executive director of the Union since its inception.
So our mission is to counter negative cultural influences that misdirect the lives of youth. And we do that through life skills prevention and mentoring programming that will, help our students to make better decisions, help them to become productive citizens, and not only help them to do that, but also help to support their parents and their caregivers in their community. Our founder and CEO, Jason Wilson, who is my husband, his vision for the Union stemmed from just his background. He was a music producer. He was a secular music producer, a really popular DJ here in the city of Detroit. And so he was making music, and as he became enlightened and as he became aware of what his true calling was as it related to ministry, he saw himself in the problem that our youth faced. He saw his role in it. And while he wasn't a rapper or lyricist, he made the music that was counter positive messaging. It was glorification of hypersexualization of women, and it was glorification of violence. It was glorification of drug usage. And so he wanted to do something to counter that, and use his gifts for good. We teach students about substance abuse prevention, teenage pregnancy prevention, effective decision-making, conflict resolution, healthy relationships with parents, and we use the technical skill building of beat making and production, songwriting, dance, theater, instruments to display kids' talents while promoting that positive messaging that we teach them.
Thank you to Nicole Wilson of the Union. To find out more about the Union, visit them online at theunion.com. And Union is spelled YUNION. This has been Natural Collisions, podcast from COAC Detroit. Remember, the word COAC itself means to work together, because we know we cannot have transformational impact if we only work alone. To learn more about COAC Detroit and upcoming initiatives, visit coacdetroit.org. Please subscribe to Natural Collisions on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will return with more conversations soon. Thank you for listening.